consent. All right, everyone. Okay. Hello? Okay. Okay, there we go. All right. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this second iteration of the Teach the Truth Thursday. Today we have Dr. Jim Garrett with us, and he's teaching Pedagogies and Difficult Knowledge. AADM is super excited to have him teaching today. As you all know, AADM is dedicated to combating discrimination and advocating for social and racial justice. We do this through a number of different programs. We do this through community service, bail support and legal fees, and doing our teen social justice program. And if you want to learn more about any of our programs, please visit us at aadmmovement.org. And then without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chaplain Cole Napper, who is the architect behind the Teach the Truth Thursdays. Yeah, I'm going to take it away.
Hey, everyone. So thank you very much, Denise, and thank you, Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement. My name is Chaplain Cole Napper, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce our instructor for the evening. As students of history, we know that no matter how fierce the scourge of hatred, you cannot stop progress. You can try and delay it, but you can't stop it. And when we fail to try to teach our children about difficult knowledge, we do an entire generation of young people a disservice. But really, it's a disservice to the whole country because we're not telling the truth. And we are here tonight to say to our brothers and sisters across the country, but particularly here in the South, it's time. It's past time that we told the whole truth about our nation's history. There is no left, no right, no Democrat, no Republican. We are all Americans regardless. We have a complex history, but at the end of the day, now is the time for us to unify. So Teach the Truth Thursdays is about having so much love for this country of ours that we have educators from all over the South who are pledging to teach the truth in their classrooms. And we talk to teachers all the time who say that they want to teach their kids the truth about American history, but they simply don't know how. So T3 Thursdays are for you. This 100% free professional development is a form of 21st century civil rights leadership. And our educators in particular are charged with being the perfecters of our great democracy. So tonight, we are honored to have our guest instructor, Dr. Jim Garrett. Dr. Jim Garrett is an associate professor of social studies education in the Mary Frances Early College of Education at the University of Georgia. He received his PhD in curriculum instruction and teacher education from Michigan State University. Dr. Garrett's research centers on the emotional demands of learning and teaching about the social world, particularly when that learning has to do with trauma, crisis, or vulnerability. His latest research project was studying the circulation of affect and emotion during classroom discussions of current socio-political issues, such as gun violence, anti-Black racism, and immigration. Currently, he is interested in what social studies teachers can learn from the methods of civil rights activists of the past and the present. With these interests in mind, Dr. Garrett has been invited by Ms. Hattie Whitehead, who's in our audience tonight. We are very honored to have you here. Thank you, Hattie. We are honored to create lessons. Dr. Garrett is creating lessons related to the Lenontown Project, about UGA's urban renewal project of the 1960s that displaced Black residents in the area. A teacher workshop related to the Lenontown Project curriculum is coming soon, so stay tuned. Prior to pursuing his career in academia, Dr. Garrett taught high school courses in world studies, economics, psychology, and media studies. And a couple of years ago, he was a visiting professor at my alma mater, Teachers College, Columbia University in New York City. His book, Learning to Be in the World with Others, Difficult Knowledge and Social Studies Education, was published in 2017 by Peter Lang. And tonight, on behalf of Mocha Jasmine Johnson and the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, I proudly introduce our guest instructor for the evening, Dr. Jim Garrett.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Cole, and thank you so much to the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement for hosting this 8-week series. This is the second of the 8 weeks. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to see all of you here tonight. And just wanted to say before we get started that the format tonight is going to be dependent. A lot of the content's going to come from you all, and so I'm going to invite you to share who you are, what you're up to, and some thoughts about some questions that I'll pose throughout. I want to make sure that you can see my screen. Hang on one second. Are you able to see that? Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. That's it, right?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So this just real quick, this opening slide is just a screen capture of the Social Studies High School Standards of Excellence in the state of Georgia. And you'll see there that I've run a search for the term racism, and the Adobe Acrobat applications return the message that it's finished searching the document and that no matches have been found. And so we see from the beginning an absence, but in that absence, there's something there, something that we'll explore throughout the session tonight. Just real quick, we're gonna welcome each other to the space. I'm gonna explain a little bit about what I mean by this term difficult knowledge very briefly. And then we're going to have an experience together on Zoom. For many of us, there's some folks here at the office as well, and we'll close it out. So just kind of move into some introductions. I'm going to ask everybody at a certain point. I'm just going to pretend like we're sitting in a circle. So however you are on my Zoom screen is how I'm going to go around. But just want everybody to unmute in order and say who you are and why you showed up tonight. And this is based on an idea that I've been drawn to over the last couple of years called Gracious Space from the Center of Ethical Leadership, which asks us to think about a few different things. One is the spirit of how we show up to a space, how we set this space up. So in this case, we're in proximity and also at a distance. And also how we think about people who we don't know. So as you look around the Zoom room, you can see maybe some people that you know and some people that you don't. And part of a gracious space is encountering difference with people who are strangers to us. And finally, learning in public, which involves two things. One is listening, but the other is also expressing ourselves to other people in the space. So I'm going to start with folks in the room, and then the circle will kind of go to folks on Zoom. And so we'll start with Beth Mendenhall.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Beth Mendenhall. I'm a high school teacher at Cedar Shoals. I teach world history, and I'm here because I care about our system that is filled with systemic racism, and I want our students to understand why that system is in place and give them the tools they need to help dismantle that system. So I'm on a mission, I guess, and I'm happy to be here.
Miss Hattie Whitehead.
I'm here because, first thing of all, I want to be able to support Athens anti-race movement. I want to support them, and I wanted to support Dr. Jim Garrett because he has been so supportive in the Leonardtown effort, and also he showed up and supported the Teach the Truth rally. And I asked him then, would he be able to put a lesson plan in place and put it on the website so it can be downloaded, and so our teachers in this area can teach the truth about what happened to Leonardtown. It's local history. So that's why I'm here. I'm going to continue to support where we are and where we are going in teaching the truth.
Amen. Amen.
Amelia.
Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Amelia. I'm a former Cedar Shoals, proud social studies teacher, Eastside Athens native. That's right. So I see some Cedar folks in the crowd. And I came here tonight because I am fired up about getting teachers organized and in community with folks around these issues. We know that when teachers work together, especially in conjunction with civil rights leaders, that we can make real change happen, that it's not just like a pipe dream, like it can be achieved. And so I think that by learning these skills and learning these content and doing it together and standing together, that we are really helping bring to the fore like racial justice in Athens, Georgia. And that's incredibly exciting to me.
Let's go to Patricia Priest.
Yes, hi, I'm Pat Priest, and I'm a writer. I'm a former teacher, but now I'm a writer, and I hope to teach through letters to the editor and opinion pieces so that we can push back against the ridiculous characterizations of CRT and teaching and learning about racism. I also plan events in town. Here to figure out how to do that better. I like this gracious space. That's what I've been trying to do.
Thanks for being here. Dr. Dawi Chin.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Tiana Dowie Chin. I am a faculty member at UGA. I came tonight because I am continuously learning about Athens and growing, and am interested in learning about the community that I'm working in, and hope to continue to do this type of work and to support my colleague, Jim. So I'm excited to learn from him tonight.
Thanks for being here. Montu.
Montu, I am an educator at Cedar Shoals High School. I teach ethnic studies and peer leadership. And I am here just to learn and expand my knowledge.
Thanks for being here. It's good to meet you. B. Nordgren.
Hey everyone, I am B. Nordgren. I teach English as a second language at Cedar, and like Beth and many of us, I witness the precipitation of systemic racism every day, all day at our school. The anger, the trauma, the struggle, the anxiety, well, and then throw in a pandemic, and it's just all so much right now. So I too am here to learn and support how best I can. Support
Thanks
the cause.
so much. Prior Green.
I feel like I'm relatively new to Athens. My wife came down here to do her postdoc at UGA. Now she's working at Clark Central High School as an instructional coach for the science department. I myself am an evidence-based practice manager for community corrections, and I see the systemic racism and how deep it runs. So especially related to this class here, I want to really take away more, not back down from any difficult conversation when it comes to systemic racism, and that's family included. And I've had quite a few hard conversations with my brother, and I'm just not going to quit.
Thanks so much. Yeah, family classroom is one thing. Layering on family is a different set of circumstances and difficulty for sure. But I'm glad you're here. Matt Kaplan.
Hey y'all, my name is Matt, and I've just finished a master's degree in reconciliation and peace building. And so my final project was called Peace Processes for Building Beloved Community. And since then, I came tonight because right now I'm doing a Georgia conflict there on school-based restorative practices, and I found out about this anti-discrimination movement through Chapel. So last week it was a great meeting. I'm passionate about meetings. Want to create a better world. I'll be here with you.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Matt. You're breaking up a little bit. I think we caught most of what you were saying. Nice to see you. Jesse Evans.
Hey everybody, I'm Jesse Evans. I'm sorry I'm mobile right now. Otherwise I'd be settled with the mic or with the camera on. I am here tonight because for a variety of reasons. I teach government civics, my 9th year teaching at Cedar. I'm very appreciative of the work that AADM does, that Mocha and Noah and everybody does. I went to UGA for my MAT, and when I was there, I was a student of Jim's a couple times, and I really appreciated what he brought to the classroom there. I'm excited to continue learning from him, and I appreciate his pedagogy. And yeah, I want some of the things I try to teach toward in my own classroom: racial justice, social justice, economic justice. I'm a big fan of teaching truth. And I want to do it in a way that's most effective and the healthiest for my students.
Yes.
Thanks for that, Jesse. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for that. Dr. Elaine Alvey.
Hi there, you all. I'm joining in solidarity from Anchorage, Alaska, where I'm the Director of Teacher Education at Alaska Pacific University. And I'm here tonight because I spent a lot of time thinking about difficult knowledge and pedagogies of difficult knowledge, particularly sort of as they're showing up in our colonial education spaces here in the state of Alaska.
Good to see you, Elaine. Sarah McMillan.
Hi, my name is Sarah McMillan. I'm a first-year teacher at Cedar Shoals High School. I have a background in political science from UGA, and I'm here because, like Mr. Miller said, I just want to expand my knowledge of pedagogy and try and connect as much as I can with the Athens community.
Cedar Shoals. Barb Benson.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Barb. I am the secretary of Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, a board member, a volunteer. And I came tonight because I want to learn the truth and because I am continually trying to become a stronger AADM advocate for social justice and racial justice. Thanks, y'all.
Wow, what a great group. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to say a little bit about a difficult knowledge. And to do that, I'm going to read a quick quote from the scholars who coined this term, which is that difficult knowledge is a concept meant to signify representations of social trauma in curriculum and the individual's encounter with them in pedagogy. So essentially what we have going on here is a recognition that when we're meant to make a lesson plan out of someone's suffering, out of upheaval, out of hatred, violence, calamity, that we can expect that when an individual encounters that something other than a one-to-one transfer of knowledge is going to happen. And so I think it's not that every time we learn something that it brings an emotional response to it. For instance, like if I turn on the news in the morning and the weather person says it might rain today, bring a raincoat, depending on the circumstances, that's not going to excite me very much, and that's easy for me to accommodate. I've learned new information, I'm going to adapt in relation to it. But the more central that knowledge is to who we are and our place in the world and the relationships we have with it, the more likely it is that pretty heightened emotions are going to be on the scene. I'll say a couple other things about that is that when I'm thinking about the ways that we teach about things that might carry with it some kind of difficulty, that we have to accommodate that emotion rather than try and dismiss it. So one of the things I'm most kind of not certain about, but I'm committed to this idea that no expression of emotion should be discouraged by our students, that we should invite that into the classroom. It's all my justification is it's already there. So if someone's sitting there and they're upset, that upset is already there. And so helping students articulate those things in a manner in which we can express ourselves and be heard by others is really important. And like the second thing is that the facts just aren't facts. Like people, if we're talking about teaching the truth, we have to have a recognition that it's not just as simple as me saying and you learning. We've known that for a long time, and now we know that so clearly from our heightened political upheavals and situations. And then finally, when we're coming up as teachers, I think, and as students, we're often told, the more you know, the better things will be. The more you know, the better off you'll be. And I think that's true. But I don't think that prepares us for circumstances in which learning can be painful, where it might not feel like a good thing at all. Like what happens when we reach back into the past, and what we find there is not pretty. That it's for me as a white person, the discomfort and the disquieting tumultuousness that it brings, like, oh wow, like I wasn't raised to know that. And when I'm exposed to such information, it can be destabilizing. And so in majority white spaces, as you might know, that manifests as guilt or defensiveness or anger at the teacher or something like that. So difficult knowledge is this set of, it's not so much a thing. It's not like an object, like difficult knowledge, like I'll hand you a piece of knowledge. It's more about a situation and a relation to it, which I'm hoping we can illustrate a little bit here over the next several minutes. So I've got a thought experiment for us. So this is we're going to learn together. I'm going to present to you two text examples, each that represent one paragraph that represents the experience of enslavement. One of those examples is from the American Odyssey U.S. history textbook, which I think it's not this edition anymore, but it's still a widely circulating textbook in the United States. And the other is a paragraph from Between the World and Me, Ta-Nehisi Coates' book. And I'm going to have some prompts associated with this. So what I'm going to do, when I turn to the next slide, what you're going to see is a paragraph from the American Odyssey textbook. I'll go there now. And I'll let you read that on your own. And as you're reading that, what I want you to do is note a word or a phrase that you notice affecting you, that you notice making you sit up a little straighter, raising an eyebrow, or otherwise. And then also from the text, and also take note of what you're feeling as you read this. So I'll give you a minute to do that. So let's hear a couple. We won't go around the full circle here, but let's. Are there words or phrases that you notice from this test that stand out to you? Let's hear a couple. See, and you can raise your hand, like a hand or a Zoom hand, however you want to go. Beth, why don't you start us off?
First, oh, I'm in echo chamber. First off, I don't like it when people are called slaves. So I tend to say enslaved people. So that was one thing I noticed right away, is the words we're using in this book. And many masters also sexually abused female slaves. Why are we sanitizing this? We're talking about rape. That's what it is.
Yep.
So those were some things I noticed right off the bat.
Thanks so much. Anybody else? Words or phrases? Jesse, go ahead.
So the notion that, like it says here, that they were typically given Sundays off. They were slaves 24/7, you know, like they didn't have time off. They were enslaved, like, and it was a terrible existence 24/7. It was like, you know, this idea that it was Sundays off. I don't really like that phrasing. Like, yeah, they're not in the fields on the plantation, but, you know, it's just not, I don't know, something about me that kind of struck me the wrong way.
Thanks, Jesse. Other folks? Pryor, go ahead.
The phrase about parents and children were frequently separated. Frequently separated, that's about as sanitized as you can get. It's a lot more emotional than that.
Totally. That sentence is a really interesting one for that reason. And then also, like, what do you notice about the structure of that sentence? And Pryor, that can be you, or anybody else can jump in here as well.
We'll let somebody else take that one.
Amelia, go ahead.
I noticed that it's passive. Like who's doing the separating? Like there's nobody culpable. It just kind of, oh, this is just happening. So, you know, there's no like active person who's doing this, who's selling children.
Yeah. I mean, it's passive voice, so there's no active agent. It's just happening. And this is such a common thing, not just in textbooks, but also in the way, especially white teachers tend to talk about enslavement. It's like, these were bad things that happened. And a common phrase that we hear is like, well, who am I to teach this history? This is like a white pre-service teachers, and in professional development spaces, teachers will say, I don't feel comfortable teaching this history because it's not my history. And my response is like, that's because the people who were responsible for enslavement have been left out of the written versions that you've been exposed to your whole life. So whose history is it? Who's the perpetrator? And so these are things that passages like this and techniques like this, methods like this, just slowing down one paragraph, what stands out to you? What do you notice? And helping students respond in a way like, ooh, I don't like you all did. I don't like that. This makes me feel it makes me feel something other than just like, what's the quiz at the end of the textbook chapter? Prior's your hand up again? Or
it is, because I'm looking at kind of like just following like Sundays off to cultivate their garden, then planters tended to use whips. Planters. What? I mean, that's just such a weak term and not calling it for what it is at all. It's just a really weak term. It's much worse than that.
Tiana.
That's all.
Yeah, I think relatedly, a number of people had these sentences, but words stick out to me like periodically, also, just the way that it's kind of flippant about these things that were happening to people. So to these enslaved people, many masters also, like it's a list. You're just adding this onto other things that were happening and using words like periodically to kind of soften some things that were happening.
Thanks so much. So let's go to the next example from Ta-Nehisi Coates. And as you're reading this, it's the same prompt. So I'll give you a minute or two to read through this and notice words or phrases that stand out to you and also feelings associated with it. All right, B, sorry I missed your hand a minute ago. Do you want to start us off on this one? Need to unmute real quick.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. I'm not done reading it yet.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. No worries. I gotta figure out, put my hand down. There.
We'll invite whoever wants to start us off to unmute and start sharing.
This is Prior again. I'm just a compare and contrast. Here it says, there is no uplifting way to say this, where I felt like the previous reading we had, they were trying to sanitize and find somewhat of an uplifting way to talk about it. And here they make no bones about it. And they're exactly right. There is no uplifting way to say this. So I thought that was one of the huge differences between this and the other passage.
Thanks so much.
I think for me, the phrases that really stick out are the really visceral descriptions of extreme violence and hatred. Brains blown out over the river. Like I kind of like almost am like wanting to cry a little bit when I say that. Hot iron peeling skin away. Nail driven through the tongue, ears pruned away. So in my head, I have visual imagery of human suffering, and it cracks, my heart open. That's really, really upsetting.
Jesse.
So I much prefer this language. because when we read it, we're feeling what we should feel when we're talking about this, like the enslavement, right? And what actually happened. Like, this is way far more real and accurate, right? Like, their emotions are like, much stronger as they would be naturally, like, and we're just reading about it. Like, to actually experience it or see it or live around it, like, would be even that much more, to like a higher degree of, like, emotional impact, and obviously it would be very traumatic. And he's, when he says there's no uplifting way to say this, like, when we teach, there's no uplifting way to talk about this. Like, the words that he's using, like, if we're talking about reality, talking about humanity, talking about what white people did to Black people in this country, if we're really going to talk about it, know our history, and really come to grips with what has taken place and what continues to take place with regards to racism and racial injustices, and this is the kind of language we should be using, I feel.
Other folks? B, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say about the last one, is that reading it, I thought the whole thing seemed passive. And when I finished reading this one, I thought, now this is history telling, because you are involved as the reader and you feel that pain, and it does break your heart open, and that's exactly what it should do.
I think also the language of the simple term human being, I think that is powerful. And then never naming an individual as a slave. So also not using that language or even an enslaved person, but just you see human being, and then there isn't the absence of the term slave stick out to me in this passage.
Of course, some people thought it was great that the enslaved people were taught Christianity. And that last one ended on that note, as it brought great comfort to them. And this one holds that critique right in the middle. No old Negro spirituals can wash that pain and suffering away much stronger.
Yeah, go ahead, Beth.
I was just going to add that he connects this to the national narrative by, the soul was the body that fed the tobacco, the spirit was the blood that watered the cotton, and these created the first fruits of the American garden. So now we're contrasting with that narrative of, whatever our narrative of the American spirit, it's actually, fed with the blood of these people.
Yeah, like if you look at these two back to back or on the same page, what strikes me, like having worked with these passages again and again, is that they represent the exact same objects. Human beings in conditions of enslavement. There's allusions to religion, sexual violence, gardening, separations, like in both cases, but the language is so different. And so thinking about how we can have students just compare these, I'm not so sure, like when I hear people say this is what we should do with students or this is what we shouldn't teach to students, I'm not convinced that Ta-Nehisi Coates is like, that's the right one. Or the US, and I'm not saying the US history textbook one is the right one. I'm very cautious about saying like, yes, this is the one that will make it so that students learn. I'm not so sure the equation is quite that linear. I just want to raise that as a point of just to keep it in uncertainty. I don't know. Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, and as we're talking about, like, people were talking about the biblical references to Christianity, but then it's like he's contrasting this to Eden, and says the first, talking about the first fruits, the spirit, and all these things, and our history is often idealized, you know, and like the whole like, you know, agricultural, you know, plantation South is idealized. And I think he does a good job of, you know, showing that the like, you know, basically tapping into that theme of, and that piece of our history of Christianity and of the Garden of Eden, and like, you know, showing that this was no paradise.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. Anybody else? Good. So I want you to, we're going to do another activity with these two passages, and thinking about these words and phrases that you just came up with. So I want you to complete these two sentences. One is, in the text I noticed, and the other one, as I read or thought about it, I feel. And I've got a link to a form where you can enter that. Do you have it, Amelia? No. Okay. All right. Hang on. I'll get the link just a second. All right. So that link should be in the chat now. And so take a minute, fill out that form. In the text I noticed, as I read or thought, I feel. And what I've done in that form is that you'll be able to see that form populate with other folks' responses. So you can start to kind of get a sense of how the group is thinking and feeling about these things. And then, so as other folks are filling it out, you can kind of take a look and see what's on other people's minds. And we'll come back in maybe 5 minutes.
was 5.
Let's just take another minute or so. And as if you've already entered your form or whatever, and look at other people's responses, I'm gonna ask about like things you notice in our collective responses. What are some patterns? What are some themes? What are things that stand out? Things that maybe you don't recognize as your own experience that you want to ask about someone else's. And just one more minute.
Yep.
Sorry, that took me a minute to get the screen share switched over there. Monty, you got it. Cool. Okay. So as people have a chance to look through these, take a minute and look through and see what kinds of patterns you see. If there are any words or phrases that you don't recognize. I think especially as you go down to the feeling words that people have. I want somebody to start us off by just noticing one of those. And the rule here, the constraint is that it can't be your own. Like you can't choose your own to talk about. So choose someone else's that you notice that you'd like to talk about. I'll start calling on people. Tiana, go ahead.
I'll start off by sharing that I noticed the term numb And I would say that could be another term that I would have used, but I just chose not to. But I connect with that because I feel like I read a number of passages on enslavement, and I think that after a while, I've become conditioned to be numb to the language and the description. So I connect to the feeling of numbness.
Thanks so much. How do other people respond to that word numb, or what can you imagine? Like, so Tiana shared one way in which that she experienced that as well in a certain way. Anybody else feel like that, or imagine a different way that numbness, that being numb, could also be like a different way that you might feel numb? I saw you on mute, Matt. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah. Well, so just reflecting on numb, like for me, that's connecting with something. There's just so much there that it's like I need to unpack something. I need to I guess, yeah, that's what comes up for me when I contemplate this feeling of numb, is just how much that is connected to, and I'm potentially only touching the surface, and so I need time to go deeper.
Thanks so much. B, I saw you. We're gonna jump in as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's acorns crashing on my roof. If you hear a crash. Yeah, I maybe didn't communicate that clearly, although it was clear in my head, but the first reading made me numb. Or flat. It was like, oh, mm-hmm, oh, mm-hmm. And I mean, I felt sad, but taking it for what it is and imagining young students reading it, I just felt like that it lacked meaning. So it's using the word numb in a different context, but that's kind of how it just was just like not there for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important thing. So when we look at this word, it's meant different things to different people in here. So one person talked about attaching the word numb and the feeling of numbness to the more explicit kind of narrative about enslavement, and someone else talked about the numb one is the first one. And so when I think about this idea about difficult knowledge, this is an example. It's like two texts that represent legal violence on human beings, perpetrated by human beings consciously, like this wasn't a mistake, and two incredibly different interpretations of the same emotional word. Like all these things are on the scene, circulating in our classrooms all the time. This is just a great illustration of that, so I appreciate that. So what's another word? So numb was a great start. So what's another word that stands out to you? I'll nominate a word. I see the word terrible. Someone wrote, "I feel terrible," and I'd like for people to just think about like what's the widest range possible of all the different things that you might say is terrible, or how one might feel terrible reading these two excerpts. So Elaine, Alvy, start us off with one if you're there. Or not. Let's well, Henry, are you around? We haven't met you yet. Henry, are you here? Are you tuning in?
Hey, yeah, I've been in and out, but I just got back. What I literally just got back. What was the prompt?
It's all right. We were looking at the responses on that form, and I noticed the word terrible, and what I was asking folks to do is try to imagine all the different ways, all the different interpretations of terrible one might have, the experience of terribleness. Like I can imagine a bunch of different ways someone might say that's terrible. So I'm asking for folks to name a few of those.
Okay, like specific instances in the history of enslavement, or
no, like if I'm so someone said reading these two texts made them feel terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Why? That's what I'm asking. Why would that make you feel terrible? Why would that make someone feel terrible? Barb,
I mean,
ahead.
yeah. So I mean, I could, the injustice in that is perpetuated through the way that history is currently taught is really terrible. And so, yeah, I could see that being one interpretation.
Awesome, thanks. And sorry to put you on the spot.
You're good.
Barb.
Hey, I was thinking about almost a synonym that terrible's could be a synonym for guilty. I'm wondering if maybe a Caucasian person wrote this. And I think I was thinking when I was completing this exercise, some of those feelings of shame and guilt. And so I think of the word terrible in that way. So there you go.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, and for naming, that this is a mixed race group. We're an interracial group, and I appreciate you naming that explicitly. We haven't said that yet. That's a significant thing to notice and to say. I appreciate that. Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not used to this sort of violence, obviously, right? Many people, I'd say most, probably don't experience this in their day-to-day lives. Some people do. But I think that it's, to feel terrible when reading this, it's like, it's novel and it's hard, it's difficult, it's shocking probably. So I think that it could be just a reaction to the violence and the gore and the imagery that a person might form in their mind when reading this.
Yeah, thanks so much. And also in that regard, like the opposite of numb. Barb, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think I thought the hand was going to disappear. So, but Beth, I appreciate very much, Jess.
So I was the one who wrote that. So you're right. It was a white person who said it. But I wasn't really thinking in those terms, but more as a world history teacher, there aren't a whole lot of happy things that we teach about. And it does. I mean, I do sometimes have these existential crises of, why is the world like this? Like, why do people do these terrible things all the time? And I think that, just the writing, the vivid descriptions, I just feel that terror and just sorrow, I guess, at our world and all of the things all the suffering that there is because of things that we do, choices we make, actions that we take.
Thanks for that. Mm-hmm. Let's hear one more, and it can be about the terrible, or choose another word we can talk about just real briefly before we move on.
well, horror jumps out at me. Just, I mean, I think about it in many terms, but it's like, you know, I'm a big horror movie head. Like, I love horror movies, and I just think horror in the sense of like just almost the worst thing that could ever happen. Like, it is the bottom of the ocean. Like, it doesn't get any deeper than that. Like, horror, like that is like, when I hear that, it's like, it is like horror. Like, you don't even have to explain it. You can just say that, and it's like, that is the worst of the worst. And I think that describes what happened, like what that part of history is it is horror, you know. It's just something that it's frightful, it's scary, it's like the worst of the worst.
Yeah, just and think about too, like while you're talking, Montu, I'm thinking about the difference between saying something is horrible and saying something's a horror. It's so different. And you're right, like horror, it speaks to something where it's like, it speaks to our deepest fears. Like when you watch a horror film, like why those films work the way they do is because they work on our deepest fears, vulnerability, that we are always vulnerable to others, to other forces in the world, to other people around us. Thanks for that. I appreciate that.
You go. One thing I was thinking about basic. This is Hattie, not Amelia. But one thing that I saw I didn't see on here was mad. When I would have put mad, and I couldn't stay in that place of being mad. So probably what I would have done, and if I was in a class with a mixed class like this, I was like, okay, what can I do about it now? I'm mad. So what kind of action can I take? So I won't have to stay in the mad. So as a 8th grader or a 9th grader, somebody gonna have to say, okay, Hattie, you need to go here and do this and thus and so. So I won't be mad and leave the class mad.
And Amelia, did you want to go as well?
Yeah, I mean, so I was responding to horror, but I think one thing that I felt like another alternative read to horror could be horror at the first passage. It is horrifying, right, that the powers that be are reproducing the sanitized narrative over and over. And not only that, the state of Georgia is mandating this, that this is how it's taught. Like that should horrify us. That horrifies me. And to Hattie's point, I wrote that I felt angry when I read the passage specifically about the fact that the wealth generated from enslavement was essentially like the surplus value that began American capitalism, right? And if we think about the ways that our economics is taught, again, so sanitized, so unconnected to these. And so and kind of piggybacking off of Hattie in a different sense, but it made me feel energized to continue to draw these threads out, and also to highlight the way that these things are still operating, like the fact that our campus, UGA, was built by enslaved people. We know this. The fact that UGA is continued to be maintained by Black and brown workers primarily who make poverty wages. You know, like this is still happening. And so it makes me angry, but it also, that anger is an energizing force for me, especially as a white person who knows that the economy that I benefit from was built on wealth that was generated by Black people. And so I'm not down for it, you know?
So you're moving to action.
And so stay tuned. In a few weeks, we're doing our workshop on reparations.
So thanks. I mean, that's, of course, thank you so much, Amelia, and everyone for saying these things. I want to go back to Hattie's talking about being mad, and then so what do I do? Yeah. And so when you work with students and they learn about some injustice, and let's set enslavement aside and talk about contemporary, the persistence of white supremacy and anti-Black racism, like Amelia was talking about. And it's like, well, what do we do? What do we do? And my what I say, and this might be not popular, is that like we're not doing anything right now. Like we need to sit and understand the difficulty and be with that for a second. Because one of the things that we can do easily is say like, now I've done something, and I know this isn't, of course this isn't what Hattie and Amelia are talking about, but once we do that thing, we can say like, I learned this thing, I did the thing, and now I can rid myself of the discomfort that it brings us. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
So I'm really careful about these. Yeah, Montu, exact, like the relationship to the knowledge is the key. So it's not what we know, but how we know it. Yeah, totally. Pryor, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Kind of back to the horror, and like when it comes to slavery, like a whole Southern culture being desensitized to it, I started thinking like, if we're teaching world history, and I feel like the majority, if you say Holocaust, people go, that's horrific. If you say slavery, not near as many people will say horrific. Why is that? They're both just horrific, but I really think there's a huge difference. And just we've been desensitized to that as a culture. Just like that word does not pop up with slavery, but it would pop up with the Holocaust. I just throw that out there.
Thing that I hear, and the Holocaust studies and Holocaust education is the space where the term difficult knowledge originated, and specifically around teaching Anne Frank's diary. And the question of like, what are kids supposed to do with this knowledge of the suffering of this young girl's that she's written in her diary? Like we can't get Anne Frank back. What are we supposed to do with this? And there was all this controversy about which version of the diary was going to be published and distributed. One that's more uplifting and one that's not. Mm-hmm. And so like and the other thing that we didn't talk about tonight, another activity that I do is say like, which one of these, rank order, which one of these you would teach with, which would be you'd be more likely and least likely to teach with. And then we get into conversations about what we need to protect kids from and what our worries are when we present students of a variety of ages with these representations of difficult knowledge. But we're running. Yeah, Montu, I agree. Like teaching these two in as a pair is really, it can be really effective. They work well together that way. So we're running out of time.
I'd like to add,
and I want to save time for a couple of comments or questions before we wrap up. So Pryor, is your hand still up or did you raise it again? I wasn't paying close enough attention.
I raised it again because you said about protecting the kids, and coming from a criminal justice system, who are we protecting? Because a lot of the people I deal with who are kids are already experiencing horrible things in the environment that they live, and this probably ring true to them and stuff. They've been exposed to this. So are we just protecting middle class, upper class, social economic groups from this? Is that who we're protecting? So I think that's a good question to answer. Somehow there's an assumption that like the lower class people aren't experiencing anything. They're experiencing this horror because I work in the criminal justice system. I just know it happens.
For sure. And I don't think any of us would say a fifth grader should watch Holocaust liberation, the camp's liberations. It's like, of course, it's about this very difficult, no right answer, needing to feel the need to push our students, and sometimes that's going to mean pushing too far. Like we might show students some things that hits particular students in a way that we might not necessarily want. So it's always a calibration. It's always our best guess as teachers. Like that's why it's really important to think carefully about our theories, about what it is we're doing when we present our students with representations of historical, social, and contemporary trauma. B, go ahead.
I'd like to just also add that I have seen a lot of rides around the sun, and I taught school when I started teaching school when I just barely turned 21. And without going into it, because I know we don't have time, I just want to say that the most significant experiences that I have had and that I have had students share with me have been the ones where I have been authentic. And maybe I cried sharing a story or a piece of, I've never taught history or social studies, but it is, that's just another thing from a more pedagogical standpoint, is that I just believe that it's good for them to see us being human, and that it's hard for the words to come out sometimes. And I had just a spontaneous discussion today. I got pulled to sub during my planning. Cedar people know what that's all about. And I brought up Yeonmi Park because I just heard a podcast with her. And I ended up going, blah, 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 North Korea, Kim Jong-un, blah, 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 and these kids, wow, you know, they came alive and they wanted to know more. And I shared, and this all happened probably in under 10 minutes, but then how I ended it was by saying, I could not listen to her interview in one sitting. It was too hard for me. And that was sort of my way of, that was my truth, because I really couldn't. And then also, that's a lot for a young person to absorb, that everything that's going on there. So that's just an example, not virtue signaling. It's just real. It's just being real, and how I think that being real is so important for us as representatives of what we are as an educator. I'll just put it that way.
Totally, yeah. Like that as teachers, we can be full participants in the learning encounter. I totally agree with that. And you know, I just want to note what Patricia wrote in the chat about parents. So very early in the conversation, people talked about, I think it was Mr. Green who talked about speaking with family. And here we have the figure of family returning to our conversation. This time where we imagine parents calling, pushing back, I can't say it any better, in angry and dangerous ways. And that is, you know, that depending on where we are, like more or less a very difficult reality, especially right now. Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Thanks for that too. So we've just got a couple minutes left. I do want to hear from everybody one more time, with one last sentence stem, and just very briefly, because if we all spoke for 30 seconds, it'd be another 10 minutes. So just one more phrase, and actually just write it in the chat. As I leave here this evening, I'm thinking, just finish that sentence. But don't leave yet.
Say I'm sorry, what's the prompt? As we
I think it was as we leave here today, I'm thinking about
Hey everybody, these are amazing. I just invite everybody to notice what your colleagues and community members have written here, as a way and to think about this as the opening of a conversation rather than the end of a session. I really appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm so humbled to be a part of the community and these series of workshops. My email is very easy. It's just my name at uga.edu, jim.garrett@uga.edu. So be in touch if you want. And otherwise, I'll be seeing you at future events like this one. I'm going to pass it over to Chaplain Cole to close us out.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all so much. I was just typing in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and finish. Instructors. To both Montu and Jesse, thank you so much for being here. I'm asking you, would you all consider being instructors for our Teach the Truth Thursdays, the next iteration that we have, which is going to be in the spring, and we're going to gear it towards students. So I would love it if you both would consider being instructors for the future iterations that we have. Thank you for being here. Thank you all teachers, educators at whatever level, prior, green, folks that are doing amazing things individually and within your own networks to help create a better community. And I'm so thankful for all of that. On behalf of the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement, I want to thank Dr. Jim Garrett. Just give him a big round of applause. He is actually at the University of Georgia, and he is able to make sure that we graduate people with an understanding of their community and their impact. And this is how we're changing the world. So thank you all for being here. Next week, we are going to have an amazing class. I'm super excited about it. It's going to be taught by our very own Cedar Shoals High School teacher, Beth Mendenhall, who's here tonight. Thank you, Beth. We're super excited about it. The desegregation of Athens schools. Like, we are hoping to have some special guests, but please tell people about it. We depend on you all. This is a great crowd. Hey, Matt, thank you so much for being here. Barb, you're awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Please try and get just one more person, just one more educator here next time, right? We're going to keep on doing this. And so, it doesn't have to be anything other, a big stretch for you. But this is how we change the world. And I am absolutely convinced that that is what is happening right now. So Pat Priest, thank you very much. I don't know if you want to put in a plug for Rabbit Box. You're more than welcome to come off mute and do that.
Yes, I sure would. I was just writing to someone privately. So this coming Tuesday, Chaplain Cole and Napper and others will be telling stories at Rabbit Box. It's Tuesday at the VFW. Got to show your Vax cards. From 7 to 9, we'll hear true stories along the theme Stamped, Stories of Racism and Anti-Racism. Montu and his, as he called her, his lady, his fiance, told a story last month that was one of our best. We'll hear some great stories, and I'm sure they'll be sad and illuminating, and it should be great. Tickets are $7 through Venmo. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Patricia. And I cannot leave without thanking Amelia Haynes Wheeler. I was negligent in doing that earlier, and she deserves so much recognition. Thank you very much, Amelia, for all of your hard work in helping make all of this happen as well. Thank you. Okay, And does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns? Patty, yes, please.
Did
And
everybody? Oh,
we are having an awesome book signing tomorrow.
yes, thank you.
By Hattie Whitehead, who is here with us tonight. It says Amelia Wheeler on your screen, on your display, but it is not Amelia. That is actually Hattie Whitehead, Miss Hattie Whitehead. And Hattie, I'm going to go ahead and let you plug yourself.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm trying to learn more about self-promoting.
We'll help you.
I'm having a book signing here tomorrow at 5:30. My book is Giving Voice to Leonardtown. I am the president of the Leonardtown Project team, and also the co-chair of the Justice and Member team that is being led to put in avenues of atonement for the resolutions that that Leonardtown Project team wrote. So come tomorrow. Come by tomorrow. Drop by tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. here at the Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement Justice Center in the mall. 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. Please come out and support Hattie Whitehead. Thank you very much. Anything else? All right. Thank you all. Have a great night. We'll see you next Thursday.
Thanks, everybody.
5 o'clock, 5:30 for the online instruction. The Desegregation of Athens Schools by Beth Mendenhall. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. Later. Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Good night.